Small Town Redditors. What's the weirdest unsolved crime in your town, old or new? About 30 years ago, a refuse worker found the badly burned body of an 18-month-old boy amongst the bags and recycling. Forensics deduced that due to the condition of his liver, he died less than a week before his body was found. Hospital and medical records were used to establish that nobody in the county was missing a child. He doesn't have a name on his gravestone. Edit, it was in Cumbria, England. The police likely didn't retain a DNA sample, or we might have heard something about familial DNA by now. The local police aren't very good. Look up the case of Poppy Worthington as an example. Most local people assume he died of SIDS, then his parents panicked and tried to conceal his body. Whoever did it must have had an element of local knowledge in order to know where to put the corpse. There is a street in my city called Park Avenue. It's a very small city, mostly blue collar. In 2005, a newborn baby boy was found dead near a factory on Park Avenue. Doctors could tell he was born alive and likely lived for a few hours before he died. I don't know if he was abandoned, left to die, or killed in some way. That info was never released. Police made a statement saying, "Please come forward. We want to help you bury this child properly." The mother sent an anonymous letter to the police station 2 weeks later, and said she would come to the station soon. The letter didn't explain the circumstances, but it did say she was afraid. She never came forward. The baby was named Baby Parker and money was raised to give him a proper burial. People still leave gifts at his grave. Holy shit. I was a girls' school summer camp employee, counselor, and we do a week of training before the summer season begins, and we talk about Guy as a cautionary tale to watch yours kids like a hawk. I don't suppose it makes you feel better to know that his story is keeping kids safe today, all these years later? This has happened a number of times in the Boston area. Young able-bodied people, mostly men, disappear from bars or clubs and are eventually found in the harbor, the river, or another body of water. There's a lot of crazy conspiracy theories and talk of a serial killer, but it seems to be just a combination of alcohol, the dark, and an unfamiliarity with the area. They make a string of poor choices, wind up too close to the water, then fall in and drown when there's nobody around to notice. In my hometown there was a rich family who were rumored to have gotten their gains during World War II by working with the Japanese forces. They had large estates, mansions, and were just ridiculously rich. One day the entire family disappeared and their houses and most of their properties were either burned down, destroyed, or missing. No one knows where they went or if they are even alive. The most likely explanation was that they lost a lot favors and money, so they either run away or killed themselves deep in the mountains. They also left large amounts of land which were then given to either their previous owners or new owners. No other family member has returned, and this was about 30 years ago when it happened. A family of about 20 and they just disappeared overnight. Edit. To answer some questions, yes, this is in the Philippines. This is in the middle of bumfuck nowhere where the nearest store is 2 hours away and they have just installed concrete roads. They disappeared after Marcos lost power. The properties, especially the land, were taken by them either through deceit or extortion. No one misses them and no really gave a shit when they disappeared. That's how much they were hated. Had something like that in my hometown, only way smaller scale. There was these abandoned trailers at the end of a dirt road past the cemetery. We used to root around in them because it was spooky and they were decrepit, so it made for a thrilling night. Small town living, am I right? Anyway, I went during the day to look around and noticed a bunch of bills on the table dated in the 70s, same with a bunch of uncashed checks. The fridge still had very gnarly groceries from the 70s, including sodas and things like that. Cabinets had items in it like cleaning supplies, etc. Closets were full with clothes, beds made, etc. It was like a snapshot in time from the 70s. I still do not know what happened to this family, or why they just up and left. Here's a perfect example. https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Ken_McElroy. McElroy was shot to death in broad daylight as he sat with his wife training in his pickup truck on Skidmore's Main Street. 2. He was struck by bullets from at least 2 different firearms, in front of a crowd of people estimated as between 30 and 46. 1. To date, no one has been charged in connection with McElroy's death. 1. Only Trina claimed to identify a gunman. Every other witness either was unable to name an assailant or claimed not to have seen who fired the fatal shots. 12. The DA declined to press charges. An extensive federal investigation did not lead to any charges. One local resident later told investigators when asked what happened, he needed a killin'. Dear God, this wife Trina was a 14-year-old girl at the time. She was 12 and he was 35 when they met. He raped her several times, then as she was the only witness, forced her into a marriage to avoid charges. He burned her family's home down and killed their dog to force them to consent to the marriage. He forced her out of school and moved her in with him and his second wife, Alice, who he divorced in order to marry Trina. After the birth of Trina's baby at 14, both Trina and Alice escaped together back to Trina's parents' home. He found them and once again burned her family's home down and killed their new dog, and took them back by force. I have to agree. This man needed a killer. The comment says he might have owed gambling debts to the mob. Sounds like suicide to me. XD. Reminded me of a quote in a Terry Pratchett Discworld novel. Murder was in fact a fairly uncommon event in Ankh-Morpork, but there were a lot of suicides. Walking in the nighttime alleyways of the Shades was suicide. Asking for a short in a dwarf bar was suicide. Saying got rocks in your head to a troll was suicide. You could commit suicide very easily, if you weren't careful. Back in 2001, a friend of my friend had been secretly chatting online with a guy from Canada. They had made plans to meet up in Windsor or Detroit. A few days later, her body was found dumped in the woods. After doing some digging, police got a hold of the Canadian guy. He said he went to meet her, but she never showed, so he assumed she had stood him up. His story checked out. One suspect was this coworker, but a few months later he did a murder/suicide to his mom, so they could never get the truth out of him. It's been a cold case ever since. Edit, this was her coworker, not Canada guys. She would have traveled 7 to 8 hours to meet the guy in Detroit/Windsor, assuming she even made it out of town. Pretty recent, January this year. I'm in a village so it's even smaller. I live right next to a river, and one day after rain my grandpa went searching for snails, but he found a head still with some flesh. A neighbor had also found an arm around the same time. The police were called, they found the body and a few dogs chewing on it, but it was in a bag hanging from a tree above the river. At first it was assumed it was from the big city thrown into the river, but no, it's hanging from the damn tree. The weirdest thing is that the woman was not from the village itself. Not sure if Arlington TX counts as small. I mean, it is smaller than Fort Worth and Dallas, but the one that stands out is 8-year-old Amber Hagerman's abduction and murder. She was out riding bikes and someone in a black pickup got her into his truck and took off. They found her body in a creek a few days later. And of course the water washed away any potential DNA evidence. It's been 25 to 26 years now and the killer hasn't been found. The Amber Alert is named for her. That's an alert that goes out whenever a child is abducted. Late 90s, a natural gas compressor station was built next door to me. Entire neighborhood protested it hard. But we were just dumb farmers, and gas companies have money. Shortly after it was built, in the middle of the night, it sprung a leak. Compressed gas spewed into the air like a geyser and there was now a jet black cloud next door. Not that I could see much anyway at that hour. The sound it made was so loud, it would make a foghorn sound like a squeaky toy. Anyway, we evacuated, GTFO to the other side of town to some family and watched the news. Apparently it ended quickly enough. They estimated $13 million worth of natural gas was shot into the environment. So we go back. Reporters talk to my dad and stuff. Then 2 men show up, hand something to each news company, and everyone leaves immediately. My family and my neighbors are standing there like WTF? Where did the reporters go? Within the hour, it was no longer on the news. If you Google it, you'll find no trace of it. They just made that story disappear. Speaking of not reported accidents. My dad worked in a factory that did some kind of processing of chemicals that went to do something with food. I don't know much about it or what he did, I just know he hated the job. Well, the one day my dad decides to call out sick, the entire factory explodes. 3 people died. Half the tiny town it was located in was evacuated. Some homes were destroyed. Huge deal. Then, nothing. Dad got 3 months of pay randomly deposited in his bank account. He was sent a thanks for the many years of work, but we are closing our doors. Letter, and nothing ever came of it. There were hundreds of people in that town that lost homes, neighbors, family, friends, but if you Google Kansas town factory explodes or something like that, nothing comes up, least, not for my dad's factory. Holy shit. I was a girls' school summer camp employee, counselor, and we do a week of training before the summer season begins and we talk about Guy as a cautionary tale to watch yours kids like a hawk. I don't suppose it makes you feel better to know that his story is keeping kids safe today, all these years later?